Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to the 9th century, to the vibrant, sprawling heart of the Islamic Golden Age, the city of Baghdad. We're going to spend a day not as a warrior or a merchant, but as a scholar, a quiet translator working within the legendary House of Wisdom. Imagine a world lit only by sunlight and oil lamps, a world where the most valuable commodity isn't gold, but a rare book from a forgotten Greek philosopher. You're about to walk its halls, breathe in the scent of parchment and ink, and listen to the quiet murmur of intellectual discovery. Now, as a gentle reality check, you probably wouldn't last a week here without your morning coffee, your smartphone, or modern plumbing. The romance of history often forgets the smell. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you, so drop a comment down below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of is not a sight, but a sound. It's a voice, human and resonant, rising from a nearby minaret. It's the fajr, the pre-dawn call to prayer, a sound that flows over the sleeping city like a gentle tide. It's your alarm clock, and it has no snooze button. You lie still for a moment on your sleeping mat, which rests directly on the cool, packed earth floor of your modest home. The air is surprisingly chilly, carrying the damp scent of the nearby Tigris River and the faint, promising aroma of a baker somewhere in the neighborhood already firing up his clay oven. There are no glass panes in your small window, just a carved wooden screen, a mashrabiyah, that breaks the moonlight into a soft, hazy pattern on the opposite wall. You can just make out the simple shapes of your room, a low wooden chest holding your few possessions, a clay water jug in the corner, and the dark outline of your woolen cloak hanging from a peg. Slowly, you rise. Your joints are a little stiff from the cool night. You stretch, your hands brushing the rough texture of the mud brick wall. The city is a labyrinth of homes just like this, packed together, sharing walls, a sprawling organism of clay and community. Your first task is ritual purification, the wudu. You pour some water from the heavy jug into a shallow basin. It's shockingly cold, but it's a clean, sharp shock that brings your senses into focus. You wash your hands, your face, your arms, the cool water running in rivulets over your skin. There's a quiet deliberateness to these actions, a routine that has anchored the start of every day for as long as you can remember. For your teeth, you don't reach for a plastic brush and minty paste. Instead, you pick up a small frayed twig, a miswak, from the Salvadora persica tree. You chew one end to soften the bristles and then scrub your teeth. It has a faint, sharp, almost peppery taste. It's surprisingly effective, a piece of ancient natural hygiene that dentists today would probably find interesting. With your ablutions complete, you say your prayers, facing towards the distant city of Mecca. The voice of the muezzin has faded now, and a new quiet has settled over the city, the soft, expectant hush that comes just before the world awakens. Historians still argue about the subtle nuances of these calls to prayer in the early Abbasid period. Whether the melodic modes were standardized across the great metropolis, or if each district's muezzin had his own signature style, a unique vocal fingerprint recognizable to the local residents. To you, it is simply the sound of morning. Now, you dress for the day. The process is simple, free of buttons, zippers, or anything elastic. You pull on a loose-fitting linen tunic, the fabric soft from countless washings. Over this goes a heavier robe, a thob, and you cinch it at the waist with a simple cloth belt. Finally, you wrap a turban around your head, the fabric a familiar weight. The layers are practical, designed to keep you cool when the sun is high and warm in the chilly mornings and evenings. Breakfast is not an event, it's a necessity. You break off a piece of flatbread left over from the night before. It's dense and chewy. You might have a few dates, their sticky sweetness a quick burst of energy, or perhaps a small handful of olives, salty and rich. There's no coffee. That's a pleasure centuries away from being discovered. There is no tea either. Your morning drink is a simple cup of cool water from the jug. It's a Spartan start to the day, one that would make a modern brunch enthusiast weep into their avocado toast. But it's enough. It's fuel. Your mind isn't on food anyway. It's already stirring with the tasks of the day, with the words you will wrestle, the ideas you will translate. Your destination is the intellectual heart of the city, perhaps of the entire known world, the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. The thought of it is a quiet hum of anticipation inside you. The day's work awaits, a day of turning the fading thoughts of long-dead Greeks into the living, breathing language of Arabic. A day of preserving knowledge in a world where a single book is a treasure beyond price. You pull your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders and step out of the cool darkness of your home into the pale gray light of dawn. The alleyway is narrow, so narrow that you could stretch out your arms and touch the walls of the houses on either side. The air is still, but it's beginning to stir. You hear the soft shuffling of a neighbor sweeping their doorstep, the distant rhythmic clanging of a coppersmith starting his day's work, and the plaintive braying of a donkey somewhere, protesting its load. The baker you smelled earlier is now a beacon of warmth and scent. As you pass his open doorway, the aroma of fresh, hot flatbread, hubs, rushes out to greet you. A warm, yeasty cloud that makes your simple breakfast feel very distant. You nod to the baker, a man whose flour-dusted eyebrows are a permanent feature, and he nods back, his movements economical as he slaps another round of dough onto the wall of his clay oven. You turn from the residential alley onto a wider thoroughfare, and the city's pulse quickens. The ground beneath your sandals is hard-packed earth, dusty and uneven. There is no pavement, no sewer system. A central gutter, already beginning to look a bit grim, runs down the middle of the street. You learn quickly to walk near the edges. Here the world is coming to life. Merchants are unbarring the shutters of their small shops, revealing colorful textiles, gleaming pottery, and sacks overflowing with spices that perfume the air with the sense of cinnamon, cardamom, and cumin. A water carrier, a man with a heavy goatskin bag slung over his shoulder, jostles past, calling out his trade in a sing-song voice, offering cool, fresh water for a small coin. This is the ancient equivalent of a morning traffic jam. A chaotic but strangely orderly flow of people, animals, and goods. There are no street signs, no grid system to follow. You navigate by landmarks, the fountain with the chipped tile, the weaver's shop with the bright blue awning, the crooked date palm that leans over a courtyard wall. It's a mental map sketched by habit and repetition. Losing your way would be comically easy for a newcomer. Your destination lies at the very heart of the city, for you live and work in Madinat al-Salam, the city of peace, more famously known as the Round City. This was the original core of Baghdad, a masterpiece of urban planning conceived by the Caliph al-Mansur a century earlier. It was designed as a series of perfect concentric circles, a city within a city, protected by immense walls. Historians still debate the exact population of Baghdad at its peak, with estimates ranging wildly. But within these walls, the order was meant to be absolute. The Caliph's palace and the Grand Mosque sat at the absolute center, the bullseye of the world. From this center, 4 great avenues radiated outwards, piercing the walls at 4 massive gates named for the destinations they pointed towards: Kufa, Basra, Khurasan, and Damascus. Your journey is an inward spiral, moving from the outer residential rings towards the administrative and intellectual core. As you walk, the character of the city changes. The simple mud brick homes give way to larger structures, the workshops of skilled artisans, and the bustling courtyards of the souks, or markets. Each market is dedicated to a particular trade. You pass through the street of the perfumers, where the air is thick with the heavy scent of musk, ambergris, and rose oil. Then comes the booksellers' market, a place that always makes your heart beat a little faster. Here, scribes and scholars like yourself gather, browsing the precious few books on display, their leather covers worn smooth by the hands of previous readers. A single handwritten volume, painstakingly copied, could cost as much as a small house. This isn't a place for casual paperbacks. It's a treasure trove where knowledge is a tangible and very expensive commodity. You see a fringe tidbit of daily life here, a professional storyteller gathering a small crowd of early morning workers with a dramatic tale, his voice rising and falling with the fortunes of a mythical hero. It's the 9th century version of a morning podcast, and just as addictive. Finally, you see it. Rising above the surrounding buildings is the green dome of the Caliph's palace, the Golden Gate. Your destination is part of this vast palace complex. The crowds thin out here. The noise of the city recedes, replaced by the quiet footsteps of guards and the deferential murmurs of officials and petitioners. The air feels different, more rarefied. You approach a pair of imposing wooden gates, guarded by tall, imposing soldiers in the Caliph's livery. They recognize you. You are not a petitioner or a merchant. You are a scholar, one of the quiet, invaluable workers of the House of Wisdom. You give a slight bow of your head, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. They nod in return, their faces impassive, and with a low groan of wood on stone, they swing one of the heavy gates open just enough for you to slip through. The chaos and dust of the city fall away behind you. You have arrived. Stepping through the gate is like entering another world. The clamor of the Baghdad streets is instantly muted, replaced by the gentle, rustling sound of palm fronds in a light breeze and the musical splash of water from a central fountain. You find yourself in a vast, sun-drenched courtyard, paved with cool geometric tiles. The architecture is a breathtaking blend of grandeur and tranquility. Graceful arches supported by slender columns form shaded walkways around the perimeter, offering respite from the already warming sun. The walls are made of fired brick, intricately patterned in some places, smooth and imposing in others. The very air here seems cleaner, imbued with the scent of blooming jasmine and damp earth from the carefully tended gardens that break up the expansive space. This isn't just a building, it's a sprawling campus, a sanctuary dedicated to the mind. The House of Wisdom, or Beit al-Hikmah, isn't one single room, but a complex of interconnected halls, libraries, observatories, and residences. Its origins are a topic of some debate among scholars. Some argue it began as a more modest private library for the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, a place to store his personal collection of manuscripts, including precious texts acquired after his conquests in Anatolia. Others contend that it was his son, the Caliph al-Mamun, who truly transformed it from a simple repository into the world's preeminent intellectual center, a magnet for the greatest minds of the age. For you, living and working within its walls, such debates are academic. You simply know it as the place where the world's knowledge is being gathered, translated, and reborn. You walk along one of the shaded colonnades, your soft-soled slippers making almost no sound on the polished stone. Other scholars are arriving now too, moving with the same quiet purpose. You see a mix of figures. There are men in the simple robes of a translator like yourself. There are others in more elaborate silks, court physicians, and royal astronomers whose proximity to the Caliph affords them finer things. You see Nestorian Christians, recognizable by their distinctive clerical garb, who are among the most crucial translators, as many of them are fluent in Syriac, a language that served as a vital bridge between the original Greek and the final Arabic. You might even spot a Jewish scholar, or a man who has traveled all the way from Persia, bringing with him the mathematical knowledge of India. This is one of the most remarkable things about the House of Wisdom. It is a melting pot of faiths and ethnicities, all united by a single driving passion for knowledge. Merit, not creed, is the currency here. Your destination is the main library and translation hall. As you approach the entrance, a grand arched doorway, the scent becomes more distinct. It's the smell you associate with your life's work, a dry, slightly sweet, and earthy aroma. It is the scent of paper, ink, and leather binding. It's the smell of knowledge itself. You push open a heavy, carved wooden door and step inside. The immediate impression is one of hushed, reverent space. The hall is vast, with a high ceiling supported by rows of massive columns. Light streams in from high, screened windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden insects. The light is diffused and gentle, perfect for reading without glare. Along the walls, reaching high into the shadows of the ceiling, are countless wooden shelves. And on these shelves are the treasures. Not gold or jewels, but books. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of scrolls and codices. They are arranged in alcoves, organized by subject: philosophy, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, alchemy, literature. Each volume is a survivor, a refugee from a fading world. Many are from the great libraries of the Byzantine Empire, acquired through diplomacy, purchase, or as spoils of war. Some are from Persia, carrying the wisdom of the Sasanian dynasty. Others are from as far away as India. This is the great project of the age, to gather all the significant knowledge of the ancient world under one roof. The famous Library of Alexandria may be a fading memory, but here, in Baghdad, a new one has risen in its place, fueled by the wealth of an empire and an insatiable curiosity about the universe. You feel a familiar sense of awe, the same feeling you get every morning. You are a tiny part of this grand, impossibly ambitious project. You are a guardian, a conduit for the thoughts of Aristotle, Plato, Galen, Euclid, and Ptolemy, ensuring they are not lost to the sands of time. A quirky fact of the library's organization: there's a specific and very well-paid court official whose sole job is to hunt down and acquire rare books from abroad. He's part diplomat, part spy, and part book nerd, a dream job for the ages. You find your designated workspace, a simple wooden desk in an alcove dedicated to Greek philosophy, and prepared to begin your day's labor. Your workspace is simple, almost monastic. It consists of a sturdy wooden desk, sloped slightly for easier reading and writing, and a low stool. On the desk, your tools are laid out with precision. There is a stack of freshly made paper, creamy and slightly textured to the touch. It's a luxury that scholars in Europe will not have for centuries, as they are still painstakingly preparing and writing on animal skin or vellum. Here, the secrets of paper-making, learned from Chinese prisoners of war less than a century ago, have revolutionized the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. Next to the paper is your inkwell, a small ceramic pot filled with a dense black liquid made from soot, gum arabic, and water. You have several pens or column, which are not quills from a bird, but reeds, harvested from riverbanks and carefully dried. You've carved the nib of your favorite one yourself, shaping it to a fine point that allows for the elegant flowing curves of the Arabic script. You are not working alone. You are part of a halqa, a translation circle. In the alcove with you are 3 other scholars. There is an elderly Nestorian Christian named Ishaq, whose first language is Syriac, and whose knowledge of classical Greek is profound. He is the first link in the chain. Across from you sits a younger man, a Persian named Jabir, who is a brilliant stylist, known for his poetic command of the Arabic language. And beside you is the master of the circle, a renowned physician and philosopher who oversees the project, ensuring its accuracy and clarity. The atmosphere is one of intense, collaborative concentration. No one is idly chatting. The only sounds are the rustle of paper, the quiet scratching of reed pens, and the occasional low murmur as 2 of you lean together to discuss a particularly thorny passage. Today's task is a continuation of a monumental project, translating Ptolemy's Almagest, the definitive ancient Greek treatise on astronomy. The original Greek manuscript, bound in dark leather, lies open on a stand, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. Ishaq, the Syriac speaker, has already completed the first step. He has translated the dense, technical Greek into Syriac, a language that shares a Semitic root with Arabic, making the next step more linguistically intuitive. His Syriac translation lies beside the original Greek. Your job, and the job of your circle, is the crucial final stage, translating the Syriac translation into clear, precise, and beautiful Arabic. This is not a simple mechanical process of word-for-word substitution. It is an act of intellectual resurrection. The concepts themselves are challenging, requiring a deep understanding of geometry and celestial mechanics. But the language presents its own obstacles. Greek is a language of nuance and specific philosophical terms that often have no direct equivalent in Arabic. You can't just translate, you have to interpret. When Ptolemy writes of the unmoved mover, what is the best Arabic phrase to capture that precise Aristotelian concept? Does the word logos mean word, reason, or divine order in this specific context? This is the heart of your work. The master of your circle leans over your shoulder, pointing a slender finger at a line you've just written. He doesn't speak, but you understand. Your choice of a particular verb was adequate, but not perfect. It lacked the full philosophical weight of the original. You dip your column in the ink, draw a neat line through the phrase, and begin to craft a new one, searching your mind for the perfect combination of words. Historians still argue over the exact methodology of these translation circles. Some believe in a multi-stage process, like the one you're engaged in, from Greek to Syriac to Arabic. Others suggest that some uniquely gifted bilingual scholars may have translated directly from Greek to Arabic. Both methods were likely employed depending on the text and the talent available. This period, under the patronage of Caliph al-Ma'mun, represents a famous mainstream historical fact: the translation movement. It was a massive, state-sponsored effort to absorb the scientific and philosophical knowledge of the ancient world. The Caliph wasn't just a patron, he was an active participant, the true intellectual, who would often sit in on these sessions, listening to the debates and offering his own insights. It was said he sometimes paid translators the weight of their finished books in solid gold, a powerful incentive to be both prolific and accurate. You lose all track of time. Your world shrinks to the page in front of you, to the dance of symbols and the challenge of conveying meaning across centuries and cultures. The sun climbs higher in the sky, its light shifting across the great hall. You barely notice. The quiet scratching of your reed pen is the only sound that matters. You are not just a copyist. You are a bridge between worlds, a vital conduit through which the wisdom of the ancients is flowing into a new and vibrant language, ready to be debated, challenged, and built upon by a new generation of thinkers. It's slow, painstaking work, but as you look at the page filling with graceful black script, you feel a deep, quiet satisfaction. You are saving a mind from oblivion. A subtle shift in the quality of light finally breaks your concentration. The sun is no longer streaming in from the high windows at an angle, but is now almost directly overhead, its light softer, more diffuse as it filters through the latticework screens. Your back aches with a dull, persistent throb from leaning over the desk, and your fingers are stained with ink. A low rumble in your stomach reminds you that your Spartan breakfast was many hours ago. Across the alcove, Ishak, the elderly Syriac scholar, carefully lays his reed pen down, rubs his eyes, and murmurs a few words. It is time for the midday break. There is no official bell or signal. The rhythm of the day is governed by the sun and by prayer times. As scholars begin to rise from their desks, the great hall, which had been filled with a focused, almost sacred silence, now hums with the low murmur of conversation. Stiff limbs are stretched, and quiet discussions about the morning's work begin. You carefully blot the last line you wrote, ensuring the ink is dry to prevent smudging, and place a thin wooden marker in the manuscript. You cap your inkwell and rise, feeling the blood rush back into your legs. You don't go to a bustling cafeteria. The midday meal here is a simple, contemplative affair. You join a small group of fellow translators and walk out of the library's main hall, back into the warmth of the central courtyard. The sun is bright now, and you squint as your eyes adjust. The air is warmer, thick with the scent of sun-baked stone and flowers. Instead of heading back out into the city, you make your way to a smaller, more secluded courtyard garden reserved for the scholars. Here, the shade is deep and cool beneath the broad leaves of a few large fig trees. The sound of the main fountain is more distant, replaced by the gentle burbling of a smaller water feature, a channel of clear water running through the center of the garden, an early and elegant form of air conditioning. Your meal is brought to you by a quiet servant of the palace. It is almost as simple as your breakfast. There is a stack of warm, soft flatbread, far fresher than the piece you had at dawn. With it comes a bowl of dates, plump and glistening with their own natural sugar. There might be a small dish of salty cheese, or perhaps some olives swimming in fragrant oil. The star of the meal, however, is a bowl of cool, refreshing yogurt, or laban. It's a perfect antidote to the building heat of the day. As a quirky fringe tidbit, some of the more senior physicians in the House of Wisdom are already writing treatises on diet and health, and they extol the virtues of yogurt for its digestive properties, echoing some of the very same health advice you'd hear today. It's a simple, light meal designed to refresh the mind without weighing down the body. There is no heavy, greasy food that would induce a post-lunch stupor. The afternoon's work requires a clear and focused mind. You find a spot on a low stone bench in the shade. You eat slowly, tearing off pieces of bread and dipping them into the yogurt. The conversation around you is relaxed, but it never strays far from the work. One scholar complains with gentle humor about a particularly convoluted sentence in Aristotle's Metaphysics. Another shares a small breakthrough he had in understanding a complex geometric proof from Euclid. There's a quiet camaraderie here, a shared sense of purpose that transcends the different languages you might speak at home or the different gods you might worship. You are all grappling with the same monumental texts, facing the same intellectual challenges. Historians often emphasize the great discoveries made in the House of Wisdom, the invention of algebra, the advances in medicine and astronomy, but they sometimes forget to paint a picture of these quiet, human moments. These daily routines, the shared meal, the collegial chat, were the essential backdrop for those breakthroughs. It was in these informal conversations that ideas were often sparked and problems were untangled. The mainstream historical narrative focuses on the finished books, the great intellectual leaps, but progress is also made in these small, unrecorded moments of rest and reflection, in a quiet garden over a lunch of bread and dates. After eating, you don't rush back to your desk. Many of the Muslim scholars, yourself included, will now perform their midday prayers, the Juhur. There is a small, elegant prayer hall attached to the complex for this purpose. You go through the ritual of wudu again, the cool water a welcome refreshment, and then join the others in the quiet, orderly rows of prayer. It is a moment of spiritual recentering, a brief, peaceful interlude that clears the mind. After the prayers, you linger for a few more minutes in the garden, letting the food settle, feeling the gentle breeze on your face. The intense focus of the morning has given way to a pleasant, contemplative calm. But the afternoon awaits. Ptolemy's universe, with all its intricate cycles and epicycles, is still there on your desk, waiting for you to bring it to life in your beautiful, flowing script. The break is over. It's time to get back to work. As you walk back towards the main hall, You notice a small crowd has gathered in one of the larger, semi-open-air alcoves that line the main courtyard. Curiosity piqued, you move closer. This isn't a lecture or a formal lesson. It is something far more dynamic and, to an outsider, potentially more intimidating. It is a scholarly debate, a munazara. Two men, both senior scholars recognized for their sharp intellects, are seated on cushions facing each other. A semicircle of students and fellow academics, yourself now included, has formed around them, sitting or standing in respectful silence. The atmosphere is not one of anger or shouting. There are no raised voices, no dramatic gesticulations. This is not a political argument in the city market. The intensity here is entirely intellectual, a quiet but fierce wrestling of ideas. The subject of today's debate is a fine point of Aristotelian logic, a topic that might seem mind-numbingly abstract to a layman, but which, to these men, touches upon the very nature of reality and how we can know it. One of the scholars, a man with a long gray beard and piercing eyes, is known as a staunch follower of Aristotle's original texts. The other, a younger man from the Persian city of Balkh, is an innovator, arguing that some of Aristotle's categories need to be refined and expanded in light of newer philosophical insights. The debate follows a strict, unspoken etiquette. One scholar will present a proposition, laying it out with careful, precise language. He will cite passages from the texts, build his argument step by step, and then fall silent. The other will then take his turn. He will not interrupt. He will first summarize his opponent's argument, a crucial step to demonstrate that he has listened carefully and understood it fully. Only then will he begin his rebuttal, dissecting the proposition, pointing out logical inconsistencies, and offering counterexamples. It is a slow, methodical game of intellectual chess. Every move is considered, every word chosen for maximum precision. A poorly phrased question or a sloppy definition would be an immediate sign of weakness, an opening for a sharp-witted opponent. You listen, completely engrossed. The gray-bearded scholar quotes a passage from Aristotle's prior Analytics in the original Greek, and then gives the recently agreed-upon Arabic translation. He argues that the text is clear, its meaning fixed. The younger scholar counters not by disagreeing with the translation, but by introducing a concept from Indian logic, a system of thought that had been trickling into Baghdad along the Silk routes. He suggests that this concept offers a way to resolve an apparent contradiction in Aristotle's framework. This is a classic example of the synthesis that made the House of Wisdom so revolutionary. It wasn't just about preserving the old knowledge, it was about putting different streams of thought into conversation, creating something entirely new in the process. Historians still debate the extent to which these formal debates influenced the day-to-day work of the translators. Were they a form of intellectual entertainment, a high-minded spectator sport for scholars? Or were they a crucible where new interpretations were forged, directly impacting how key philosophical terms would be rendered into Arabic? The truth is likely a mixture of both. They certainly sharpened the minds of all who participated and observed, forcing everyone to defend their positions with rigorous logic and textual evidence. A quirky, almost humorous tidbit about these debates is the role of the moderator, often the most senior scholar present. His job is not to take sides, but to act as a referee, ensuring the decorum is maintained. If an argument becomes too circular, or if one of the debaters gets a little too passionate, a rare but not unheard of occurrence, the moderator will calmly intervene, perhaps with a dry, witty comment, and steer the conversation back onto its rigorous, logical path. He is the intellectual sheepdog, keeping the flock from straying into the weeds of pointless bickering. For an institution that prized reason above all, losing one's cool was the ultimate intellectual sin. You stay for perhaps half an hour, absorbing the intricate dance of proposition and refutation. The sheer brain power on display is humbling. These are men who have dedicated their entire lives to these texts, who have memorized vast swaths of them, and who can call upon a specific line from a specific chapter at a moment's notice. It's inspiring, and also a little bit exhausting to just listen to. You feel your own mind stretching to keep up. But Ptolemy is still waiting. With a last appreciative glance at the two intellectual combatants, you quietly slip away from the edge of the crowd and continue back towards the library. The debate will likely go on for another hour at least, a quiet, smoldering fire of pure intellect in the warm Baghdad afternoon. You, however, have stars to map and an ancient universe to reconstruct, one carefully chosen Arabic word at a time. On your way back to the translation hall, you decide to take a slightly longer route, one that leads you past a corner of the complex that is decidedly less serene than the library. The air here doesn't smell of old paper and ink. Instead, it's thick with a damp, slightly pungent, and strangely organic aroma. The quiet hum of scholarly debate is replaced by a rhythmic sloshing and pounding. You have arrived at the paper maker's workshop, one of the most vital yet often overlooked components of the entire house of wisdom. You stand in the entryway of a large open-sided building, watching the artisans at work. This is where the magic happens, where the very foundation of your work is created. Without a steady, affordable supply of high-quality paper, the entire translation movement would grind to a halt. Remember, in Europe, they are still reliant on parchment and vellum, which are made from the treated skins of animals, sheep, goats, or calves. Preparing a single large manuscript might require the skins of an entire flock, making books astronomically expensive and rare. But here, you are witnessing a technological revolution in action. The process begins with the raw materials, old linen rags, discarded ropes, and other fibrous plant materials. You see workers sorting through huge piles of this textile waste, a far cry from the pristine manuscripts in the library. This is a messy, physical job. The sorted rags are then placed in large stone vats filled with water and lime, where they are left to soak and ferment. This begins the process of breaking down the tough fibers. After soaking, the real work begins. You watch a muscular man, stripped to the waist and sweating in the afternoon heat, using a massive water-powered trip hammer to pound the wet rags into a thick, pulpy slurry. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the hammer echoes through the workshop. This is a key innovation, a mechanization that vastly speeds up a process that would otherwise rely on hours of back-breaking manual labor. Once the pulp is the right consistency, a skill judged by sight and feel, it's transferred to another large vat of water. Here, the most delicate part of the process takes place. A master artisan, a waddik, stands over the vat. He holds a rectangular screen, a fine mesh made of silk or woven reeds stretched over a wooden frame. With a smooth, practiced motion that is almost like a dance, he dips the screen into the slurry and lifts it out perfectly flat. A thin, milky layer of pulp is captured on the screen, while the excess water drains away. The thickness of the final sheet of paper is determined entirely by the skill and judgment in this single, fluid movement. It's a craft that takes years to master. The freshly formed sheet, still fragile and wet, is then carefully transferred, or couched, onto a sheet of damp felt. Another piece of felt is placed on top, and the process is repeated, creating a stack of alternating paper and felt called a post. This entire stack is then moved to a massive screw press. Several men lean on a large wooden lever, turning the screw and squeezing the water out of the stack with immense pressure. Finally, the individual sheets, now strong enough to be handled, are carefully peeled from the felt and hung up to dry on long ropes or attached to smooth plastered walls, much like laundry. The workshop is festooned with these drying sheets, which rustle gently in the breeze. A quirky and rather smelly fringe tidbit is what they used for sizing the paper. To make the paper less absorbent so that ink wouldn't feather and bleed, the finished sheets were dipped in a bath of starch, often made from wheat or rice. This gave the paper a smooth, polished surface, perfect for the reed pen. It's this starchy coating that gives the paper its characteristic creamy feel and also, unfortunately, makes it a delicious snack for bookworms and other insects, a constant source of anxiety for the librarians. Historians still study the subtle differences in paper from this era. The types of fibers used, the fineness of the screen, the specific sizing agent as a way to date and place the origin of various manuscripts. The paper itself tells a story. You watch for a few more minutes, filled with a newfound appreciation for the simple sheet of paper waiting on your desk. You see it not as a mere surface, but as the product of immense labor and ingenuity. It represents a confluence of technologies from across the known world, the original idea from China, the use of linen rags from the Middle East, and the application of water-powered machinery perfected by local engineers. The House of Wisdom wasn't just a place for abstract thought, it was a hub of practical innovation, where science and craft worked hand in hand. The pounding of the trip hammer is the heartbeat that pumps the lifeblood of knowledge through the veins of the entire institution. Feeling appropriately humbled, you turn away from the noise and smells of the workshop and head back to the quiet sanctuary of the library. Later in the afternoon, after several more hours spent wrestling with Ptolemy's complex syntax, the master of your translation circle suggests you take a break and assist with a different kind of observation. Your eyes, strained from focusing on the tiny, dense script, are grateful for the reprieve. You follow him out of the main library, not towards the gardens, but towards a tall tower that rises from one corner of the palace complex. This is the Shamsiyya Observatory, one of two such astronomical facilities established in Baghdad by Caliph al-Ma'mun. It is the scientific frontier of the House of Wisdom. The climb up the winding stone staircase is long and dizzying. The air grows cooler and fresher with each step you take, and the muted sounds of the complex below fade away. When you finally emerge onto the flat, open rooftop, you have to pause for a moment to catch your breath and let your eyes adjust to the bright, unfiltered sunlight. The view is breathtaking. The whole of the round city is spread out below you, a tapestry of rooftops, courtyards, and minarets, all encircled by its massive protective walls. You can clearly see the four great avenues radiating out from the central palace, teeming with the microscopic movements of people and carts. Beyond the walls, the Tigris River glints like a silver ribbon, and the green patchwork of irrigated farmland stretches to the horizon. It feels like you are standing on top of the world. But you are not here for the view. The rooftop is cluttered with strange and wonderful instruments, gleaming in the sun. They are made of polished brass and dark wood, and are covered in precise, intricate markings. You see massive astrolabes, some of them several feet in diameter, used for measuring the altitudes of celestial bodies. There are large mounted quadrants for tracking the precise position of stars as they cross the meridian. There are armillary spheres, complex models of the heavens made of interlocking rings representing the celestial equator, the ecliptic, and other important circles of the sky. These are not just decorative objects. They are high-precision scientific instruments built by the most skilled craftsmen in the empire and designed by the mathematicians and astronomers you work alongside every day. Your task is a simple but crucial one. You are part of a team effort to verify and correct the astronomical data inherited from the ancients, most notably from Ptolemy himself. While you are translating his great work, the Almagest, these men are putting his theories to the test. A senior astronomer, his face weathered by countless hours in the sun and under the stars, directs you. Your job is to help manipulate one of the larger instruments and to carefully record the readings he calls out. Today's project is a measurement of the obliquity of the ecliptic, the angle of the Earth's axis relative to its plane of orbit around the Sun. It's a foundational measurement for creating accurate solar calendars and star charts. Using a massive quadrant, the astronomer sights the Sun, using a projection method to avoid looking at it directly, a clever and eye-saving technique. He calls out a series of numbers, angles, and minutes of arc, and you write them down with a reed pen on a sheet of paper held steady on a clipboard. Your handwriting must be impeccably clear. A poorly written 2 that looks like a 7 could throw off the entire calculation. It's meticulous, repetitive work, but there's a quiet thrill to it. The data you are recording will be used to create new, more accurate astronomical tables, the Zij, which will be used by astronomers, astrologers, and navigators across the Islamic world for centuries to come. You are not just translating old knowledge, you are actively participating in the creation of new knowledge. A mainstream historical fact is that the astronomers working here in Baghdad made some of the first significant corrections to Ptolemy's work, refining his measurements and discovering minor errors that had gone unnoticed for over 700 years. A quirky and perhaps slightly nerve-wracking aspect of this work is the sheer value of the instruments. A large brass astrolabe was not just a scientific tool, it was a work of art, often commissioned by the caliph himself at enormous expense. Dropping one, or even scratching its finely calibrated surface, would be a career-ending mistake. As a result, everyone on the rooftop moves with a slow, deliberate grace, a cautious ballet of scientific observation. Historians still marvel at the precision achieved by these Abbasid astronomers. Without telescopes, using only naked eye instruments like these, they were able to calculate the circumference of the Earth to within a startlingly small margin of error. Their secret was the size and stability of their instruments, and their relentlessly systematic approach to observation. You stay on the roof for about an hour, your face warmed by the declining sun, the wind whipping at your robes. When the lead astronomer is satisfied with the day's readings, he calls a halt to the work. You hand him your sheet of neat figures, which he will take back to the mathematicians to begin the long process of calculation. As you head back towards the stairs, you take one last look at the city below. From this height, the chaotic energy you felt on the streets this morning is transformed into a picture of order and purpose. And you, a humble translator and occasional astronomical assistant, are a small but essential part of the great mind that animates it all. As you descend the winding stairs from the observatory, the familiar, hushed atmosphere of the library complex envelops you once again. Just as you are about to return to your desk and the patient company of Ptolemy, you notice a subtle shift in the energy of the main hall. The usual low murmur of scholarly activity has died down, replaced by an expectant silence. Scholars are standing up from their desks, not packing away their things, but turning their faces towards the grand entrance. Servants are moving with a quiet, urgent purpose, straightening cushions and making small adjustments. The air itself seems to be holding its breath. Then you see him. Framed in the great arched doorway, surrounded by a small retinue of guards and advisors, is the Caliph himself, Abu al-Abbas Abdallah ibn Harun al-Rashid, better known as Al-Mamun. He is not a distant ceremonial figurehead. He is the driving force behind the House of Wisdom, its chief patron and its most demanding intellectual client. His presence here is not a rare, formal occasion. It is a regular and always slightly nerve-wracking feature of life in the Bayat al-Hikmah. You, like everyone else, perform a subtle act of deference, a slight lowering of your head and gaze as he enters. It is not the prostration demanded by ancient kings, but a gesture of deep respect for his station, and more importantly, for his intellect. Al-Mamun is in his prime, a tall man with a commanding presence, but his eyes are those of a scholar, curious, intense, and perpetually searching. He is dressed in fine silks, but in a simpler style than he would wear for a formal court audience. Here, he is not just the ruler of a vast empire. He is the lead researcher, the chief executive of this grand intellectual enterprise. He doesn't make a grand speech. Instead, he begins to walk slowly through the hall, his soft leather boots making almost no sound on the stone floor. He moves with a quiet, genuine curiosity, stopping at various desks and translation circles. His guards remain at a respectful distance. This is his domain, and he is completely at ease here. He pauses at an alcove where a team is working on the medical texts of Galen. He leans in, asks a quiet question of the lead translator, and listens intently to the answer, his brow furrowed in concentration. He might offer a suggestion or ask for clarification on a specific point, demonstrating a knowledge of the subject that is far from superficial. This is the man who, according to legend, was visited in a dream by the spirit of Aristotle himself, a dream that is said to have solidified his lifelong commitment to Hellenistic philosophy and science. As he moves closer to your section, you feel a knot of nervous anticipation in your stomach. It's the 9th century equivalent of having the CEO of your company drop by your cubicle for an unannounced performance review. He eventually arrives at your circle, which is focused on the astronomical works. The master of your group bows respectfully and begins to explain the specific passage from the Alchemist you have been tackling today, a particularly difficult section on the mathematical models for planetary motion. Al-Mamun listens, his eyes flicking from the original Greek manuscript to your fresh Arabic translation. He points to a single word you have chosen to translate the Greek term for epicycle. He asks, in a quiet but firm voice, why you chose that specific word over another possible and more common synonym. Your heart pounds. This is a direct test of your understanding. The master of your circle, thankfully, steps in to answer, but he gestures for you to explain the nuance. You clear your throat, which is suddenly very dry, and explain that the word you chose carries a more precise mathematical connotation of a circle within a circle, which you believe is closer to Ptolemy's original intent than the more general term for a simple orbit. You explain your reasoning, your voice barely a whisper, but, you hope, clear and logical. The Caliph considers your explanation for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the page. The silence stretches out, feeling like an eternity. Then he gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," he says simply. "Clarity is paramount." And with that, he moves on to the next desk. You feel a wave of relief so profound that your knees feel slightly weak. You have passed the test. This personal involvement is a key historical fact about Al-Mamun. He didn't just write checks, he was intellectually invested. Historians still debate his primary motivation. Was it pure, disinterested love of knowledge? Or was it also a sophisticated political tool, a way to demonstrate the cultural and intellectual supremacy of his Abbasid Caliphate over all rivals, including the Byzantine Empire from which he was acquiring so many of his precious books? It was almost certainly a potent mixture of both. A quirky and slightly intimidating fringe detail of these visits, Al-Mamun was known to have a photographic memory and an insatiable appetite for debate. He would sometimes engage scholars in spontaneous munazara, right there in the library, challenging them on points of theology, philosophy, or science. While it was a great honor, it was also a terrifying prospect. To be outwitted by the Caliph himself in a public forum was a humiliation few would ever forget. You are just grateful that your interaction was brief and that your choice of words met with his approval. You watch as he completes his tour of the hall, a silent, powerful current that has energized the entire room. After he leaves, a collective, inaudible sigh of relief seems to pass through the hall, and then slowly, the familiar, comforting scratch of reed on paper resumes its gentle rhythm. Now that the Caliph has departed and the low-grade tension has dissipated from the hall, you feel the need to stretch your legs again and clear your head after that intense encounter. You decide to visit another part of the House of Wisdom, a quieter chamber known to be a hive of a very different kind of intellectual activity. You make your way to a wing of the complex where the air is somehow even more still, the silence more profound. This is the domain of the mathematicians. You peer into a large room. Unlike the translation hall with its collaborative circles, the mathematicians here work in a more solitary fashion. The room is lined with individual desks, and each scholar is deeply engrossed in his own world of numbers and symbols. There are no loud debates here, only the soft rustle of paper and the occasional, almost inaudible mutter of a man talking to himself as he works through a complex problem. The surfaces of their desks are covered not just with texts, but with diagrams, geometric shapes, drawn with the aid of compasses and straight edges, and columns of figures that look like a secret code. Your attention is drawn to one man in particular, who seems to be the quiet center of gravity in the room. He is not old, but his face is lined with the intensity of his concentration. He has a stack of paper on one side, covered with equations, and a blank sheet in front of him on which he is slowly, methodically building a new line of reasoning. This is Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar whose work in this very room is about to change the world forever. You, of course, don't know this. To you, he is simply one of the most brilliant and respected minds in the entire institution. You watch from a respectful distance as he works. He is not merely translating or commenting on the works of the ancients. He is doing something new. He is taking the number system that has recently arrived from India, including the revolutionary concept of zero, and fusing it with the rigorous logic of Greek geometry. On his pages, you can see him manipulating these new numerals in ways that would be impossibly cumbersome using the old Roman or Greek systems. This is a mainstream historical fact of immense importance. Al-Khwarizmi's book, written here in the House of Wisdom, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, would introduce this new system of arithmetic to the world. The title of his book in Arabic, Al-Jabar wa al-Muqabala, gives us the very word algebra. He is working on a problem. He has written out a scenario, something about a certain amount of money being divided according to a specific ratio. But instead of using a specific number, he has written the word shay, which in Arabic means thing or something, to represent the unknown quantity. This is the conceptual leap. He is creating a system where one can solve for an unknown value by performing a series of logical operations on both sides of a balanced equation. He is abstracting the problem, turning a specific question about money into a universal formula that can be applied to any similar problem. The thing, the shay, would eventually become the x in Western mathematics. You are, without realizing it, watching the birth of algebra. A quirky and rather charming tidbit about the work here relates to the practical applications of their mathematics. While some scholars were focused on pure abstract theory, many, including al-Khwarizmi, were deeply engaged in solving real-world problems. The Caliph needed precise methods for calculating inheritance shares according to Islamic law, which involved complex fractions. He needed accurate ways to survey land for taxation and for the construction of canals. He needed better astronomical tables for determining the direction of Mecca from any point in his vast empire. So, Al-Khwarizmi's work on quadratic equations wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was high-tech problem-solving for the Abbasid state. The mathematicians were the 9th century equivalent of the software engineers and data scientists at a major tech company. Historians still debate the full extent of the cross-pollination between the different departments of the House of Wisdom. Did a translator working on Euclid's Elements sit down with al-Khwarizmi to discuss a particular proof? Did an astronomer grappling with Ptolemy's data ask a mathematician to develop a new computational shortcut? The physical proximity and the shared intellectual environment make it almost certain that such collaborations were constant and fruitful, even if they were not formally recorded. The institution was designed as an ecosystem, where a breakthrough in one field could quickly be applied to a problem in another. You don't dare to interrupt the great man's concentration. To do so would be like waking a sleepwalker who is navigating a treacherous path. His mind is in a world of pure logic, a place of elegant proofs and balanced equations. You simply watch for a few minutes, feeling a sense of awe at the silent, invisible power of the work being done in this room. While you and your colleagues are preserving the knowledge of the past, these men are building the framework of the future. The numbers and symbols on Al-Khwarizmi's page will one day guide the ships of explorers, design cathedrals, and ultimately send rockets to the moon. Feeling thoroughly humbled by the presence of a different kind of genius, you quietly retreat from the mathematician's chamber, leaving him to his silent, world-changing calculations. Leaving the serene, cerebral world of the mathematicians, you wander down another colonnade, drawn by a scent that is entirely different from paper or dust. It's a complex medicinal aroma, a mixture of dried herbs, pungent spices, and something vaguely chemical, like a mineral being ground to dust. This scent marks your arrival at the medical wing, which functions as both a library and a practical research center for the physicians of the caliph's court. You step into a hall that is brighter and more open than the others. Sunlight streams in, illuminating shelves lined not only with books, but with hundreds of ceramic and glass jars, each meticulously labeled in neat Arabic script. Inside the jars, you can see the dark, twisted shapes of roots, the delicate pressings of dried flowers, bundles of leaves, and powders of every imaginable color. This is the materia medica, the pharmacy, a comprehensive collection of every known medicinal substance, gathered from all corners of the empire and beyond, from the mountains of Persia, the forests of India, and the coasts of Africa. Here, the primary focus is on the works of the Greek physician Galen of Pergamon. His writings, which synthesized and expanded upon the Hippocratic tradition, are considered the absolute pinnacle of medical knowledge. Just as your circle is translating Ptolemy, teams of scholars and physicians here are working their way through Galen's vast and complex corpus, rendering his detailed anatomical descriptions, his diagnostic methods, and his complex pharmaceutical recipes into Arabic. This is a mainstream historical fact of profound significance. The preservation and translation of Galen's work in Baghdad formed the bedrock of medical education in the Islamic world and, later, in Europe, for the next 600 years. You see a group of physicians huddled around a table, a large, recently translated volume of Galen open before them. They are in a heated but quiet discussion. An elderly physician with a kindly, wrinkled face is pointing to a passage describing the symptoms of a particular ailment, let's say a persistent cough with a fever. He traces the lines of the text with his finger, comparing Galen's description with his own clinical experience treating patients in the city's Bimaristan, or hospital. He's not just passively accepting the ancient text, he is actively engaging with it, using it as a diagnostic tool. Nearby, an apothecary is carefully weighing out ingredients on a delicate bronze balance scale. He consults a translated recipe, and then, with the precision of a jeweler, he takes a pinch of powdered ginger from one jar, some dried licorice root from another, and a few precious saffron threads from a small, tightly sealed box. He is compounding a remedy, a complex syrup that Galen prescribed for respiratory complaints. The meticulousness of his work is a testament to the seriousness of their craft. But it's not all just ancient history. A quirky and forward-looking aspect of the medical wing is its emphasis on clinical observation and even experimentation. While Galen was revered, he was not considered infallible. You might see a physician making careful notes in a personal journal, recording the progress of a patient who was given a slightly modified version of a Galenic remedy. This is the beginning of clinical case histories, a crucial step towards a more evidence-based medicine. One of the most famous physicians of this era, Al-Razi, or Rhazes, who would work in Baghdad shortly after your time, would write a famous treatise titled Doubts About Galen, in which he respectfully but firmly challenged some of the master's conclusions based on his own direct observations. The spirit of critical inquiry was alive and well. Historians still debate the extent to which human dissection was practiced during this period. The direct study of human anatomy was a complex issue, fraught with religious and social taboos. While Galen's anatomical knowledge was based on his dissections of apes and pigs, some evidence suggests that some Muslim physicians may have discreetly performed post-mortem examinations to further their understanding, though this was certainly not a common or public practice. More often, they advanced their surgical skills through the treatment of injuries and the careful study of inherited texts, which were now clearer and more accessible than ever before, thanks to the work of the translators right here in this wing. You watch as a young medical student carefully copies an anatomical diagram from a translated manuscript. It's a drawing of the human eye, showing the various layers and humors as described by Galen. The drawing is schematic, not perfectly realistic by modern standards, but it represents the most advanced understanding of ophthalmology in the world at that time. In fact, the physicians of Baghdad were renowned for their skill in eye surgery, particularly the removal of cataracts, a delicate procedure that they performed with specialized fine instruments. You spend a few more minutes just absorbing the atmosphere of quiet, healing purpose. This is where the abstract knowledge being translated in the other halls meets the reality of the human body. The philosophical debates over Aristotle's logic seem a world away from the immediate practical concern of how to soothe a fever or set a broken bone. The House of Wisdom was not an ivory tower disconnected from the needs of the people. It was a living institution, and here in the medical wing, its heart was beating with a quiet, compassionate rhythm. As the afternoon light begins to soften and slant, casting long, elegant shadows across the courtyards, you return to the main library hall. The initial wave of post-lunch energy has subsided, and a comfortable, productive quiet has settled over the room once more. While the translators and mathematicians are the celebrated stars of the House of Wisdom, you now turn your attention to a group of scholars whose work is just as essential, yet far less glamorous. These are the scribes and copyists, the human printing presses of the 9th century. You walk towards a section of the library specifically designated for them. Here, the desks are arranged in neat rows, and the atmosphere is one of almost factory-like efficiency, albeit a silent, beautiful factory. Each scribe sits hunched over his desk, a model of perfect posture and unwavering focus. Their task is monumental in its scope and mind-numbing in its repetition, to create perfect, error-free copies of the newly translated texts. A single translation, once finalized by a master scholar, is of little use if it remains a single copy. To be disseminated, studied, and preserved, it must be replicated. You watch one scribe at work, and it's mesmerizing. His movements are a study in economy and grace. He has 2 books open before him. On his left is the master copy, the freshly completed translation of, perhaps, Euclid's Elements. On his right is a bound volume of blank, high-quality paper. He reads a short phrase from the master copy, his lips moving silently as he commits it to memory. Then he turns to the blank page, and with a fluid, unbroken motion of his hand, inscribes the phrase in elegant, looping Cufic script. His hand does not shake. His lines are perfectly spaced. The letters are so uniform and well-formed that they look as if they were printed. Then he pauses, his eyes darting back to the original to check his work, before memorizing the next phrase. This is his rhythm, a cycle of read, memorize, write, check, repeated thousands upon thousands of times. The tools are the same as yours, the reed kalam, the pot of black ink, but the skill is of a different order. This is not about interpretation, it is about perfect fidelity. A single misplaced dot or a carelessly formed letter could alter the meaning of a crucial mathematical formula or a philosophical argument. The pressure to be perfect is immense. This meticulous work is the primary reason so many ancient texts survived to the modern day. While monasteries in Europe were also copying texts, the scale and state-sponsored nature of the work in Baghdad were unprecedented. It was a massive project to build a durable archive of human knowledge.
A quirky and very human fringe tidbit can sometimes be found in the margins of these manuscripts. While the scribes were expected to be perfect copying machines, they were still human. Occasionally, a scribe might add a tiny personal note in the margin, a colophon, at the very end of a manuscript. These notes might include the scribe's name, the date the copy was completed, and sometimes a short prayer of thanks. On even rarer occasions, a scribe might complain about the low quality of the original manuscript he was copying, or the poor lighting, or even the pain in his back. These small, illicit marginalia are treasures for historians, brief, personal glimpses into the daily life and grind of these otherwise anonymous workers. Historians still debate the organizational structure of these scriptoriums. Was it a gig economy where freelance scribes were paid by the page? Or were they salaried employees of the caliph's court, working a set number of hours each day? The evidence suggests a mix of both. Highly trusted scribes were likely on the permanent staff of the House of Wisdom, while for massive projects, a call might go out to the bookseller's market to hire additional vetted copyists to meet a deadline. The light begins to fail. The sun is now low in the sky, and the great hall is sinking into a deep twilight. Servants move silently through the hall, lighting dozens of oil lamps. These are simple clay vessels with a wick filled with olive oil. They cast a warm, flickering, golden light, but also produce a faint, oily smoke and a constant low hiss. The scribes don't stop. They simply pull the lamps closer, their faces illuminated from below, creating masks of shadow and light. Their work continues, their concentration unbroken. The dim, flickering light makes their already difficult task even more challenging, increasing the strain on their eyes. You can only imagine the toll this work would take over a lifetime. You feel a deep sense of respect for these men. Your work as a translator is intellectually demanding, a dance of nuance and meaning. But their work requires a different kind of strength, the fortitude to subordinate their own ego completely to the text, the discipline to perform a repetitive task with unwavering precision for hours, days, and weeks on end. They are the silent, steady hands that are building the library, volume by volume. Without their endless patient labor, the brilliant thoughts of the translators and the groundbreaking discoveries of the scientists would remain locked away, known only to a privileged few. They are the unsung heroes of the House of Wisdom. As the oil lamps cast their flickering, uncertain glow across the hall, the energy shifts once more. The day's formal work is winding down. Scribes are carefully cleaning their pens, translators are stacking their notes, but not everyone is preparing to leave. In the pockets of light between the towering shelves, new conversations are starting, quieter and more speculative than the formal midday debates. This is the time for whispers, for rumors of new acquisitions and intellectual gossip. You find yourself drawn to one such conversation, happening in a secluded alcove dedicated to rare manuscripts. A small group of senior scholars are gathered around a table, their faces etched with a mixture of excitement and frustration. In the center of the table, carefully laid out on a velvet cloth, is not a complete book, but a collection of loose, unbound pages, a fragmented manuscript. The parchment is dark and brittle with age, the edges crumbling. The script is an unfamiliar, cramped version of Greek, and in some places the ink has faded so badly it is nearly invisible. This is the lifeblood of the House of Wisdom, a new arrival. A mainstream historical fact is that Caliph al-Ma'mun and his predecessors spent fortunes sending agents and emissaries across the known world to hunt and acquire books. They journeyed to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, to monasteries in Syria and Egypt, and along the Silk Road. They came back with not just perfect, complete codices, but also with damaged, partial, and lost texts like this one. These fragments were intellectual puzzles of the highest order. The head librarian, a man with a reputation for being able to identify a text from a single surviving phrase, is examining the pages with a small magnifying lens, a piece of polished quartz. He murmurs that he believes it might be a commentary on Aristotle's Poetics, a work long thought to be lost in its complete form. Another scholar disagrees, pointing to a specific series of words that suggests a Neoplatonic philosophical treatise. The debate is collegial but intense. Identifying the text is the first crucial step. What is it? Who wrote it? When? This leads to the next layer of the puzzle. The manuscript is clearly incomplete. Pages are missing, perhaps lost to fire, water, or the simple ravages of time centuries ago. A scholar asks the emissary who brought the book, a man whose travels have made his face as weathered as the parchment itself, about its provenance. Where did he find it? In the dusty library of a remote monastery. Was there any sign of the missing pages? The emissary shakes his head grimly. He had to bargain for weeks just to acquire these few surviving sheets. The rest, the monks told him, had likely been reused centuries ago, the original ink scraped off so the valuable parchment could be used for a new text, a common, and for scholars like you, heartbreaking practice. A quirky, almost fantastical fringe tidbit that circulates in the House of Wisdom are the stories of these book hunters. They are the heroes of the scholarly world, There are tales of emissaries disguising themselves as merchants to gain access to private libraries, of outbidding Byzantine agents at auction for a rare medical text, or of discovering a priceless manuscript being used as a doorstop in a forgotten church. These stories, likely embellished with each telling, become the stuff of legend, fueling the dreams of every scholar who fantasizes about rediscovering a lost dialogue of Plato or the complete histories of Livy. Historians still debate the full extent of lost classical knowledge. How many works by major Greek and Roman authors have vanished completely, with not even a fragment like this one surviving? The tantalizing lists of titles mentioned in other ancient works suggest that what we have today may be only a small fraction of the total literary and scientific output of the ancient world. Each new fragmentary acquisition in a place like the House of Wisdom offered a sliver of hope that a piece of that lost world could be reclaimed. You listen as the scholars discuss the next steps. First, the fragile pages will have to be painstakingly conserved. Then the text will be transcribed, with gaps left where the words are illegible or the pages are missing. Then begins the real detective work, comparing the surviving text to other known works of the suspected author, trying to reconstruct the missing arguments based on the fragments that remain. It is a slow, frustrating, and often thankless task, one that might take years and ultimately lead to a dead end. But the possibility, however slim, that these brittle pages contain a forgotten masterpiece is a powerful motivator. You feel a pang of melancholy as you look at the fragmented manuscript. It is a physical embodiment of how fragile knowledge is, how easily it can be lost. At the same time, you feel a surge of pride in the work being done here. This room, this institution, is a bulwark against that loss. It is a fortress of memory, fighting a constant battle against the entropy of time. The conversation continues in low, excited whispers as you turn to leave, the scholars already lost in the grand, challenging puzzle that has just landed on their table from a distant, fading world. The call for the evening prayer, the Maghrib, echoes from the minarets across Baghdad. Its resonant, melancholic melody signals the end of the day. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the sky visible through the high windows of the library has turned a deep, bruised purple. Inside, the oil lamps now provide the only light, their flickering flames creating a warm, intimate atmosphere that is vastly different from the bright, analytical light of day. The great hall is emptying out. The frantic energy of the day's work has finally subsided into a weary, contented calm. It is time to go home. You begin the slow, deliberate process of packing up your workspace for the night. You don't just shove your papers into a bag. Each item is treated with a kind of reverence. You carefully blot the last page of your translation to ensure not a single drop of ink is wet. You wipe the nib of your reed pen clean with a soft cloth before placing it in its wooden case. You cap the inkwell tightly. The precious master copy of Ptolemy's Almagest, on loan from the caliph's private collection, is gently closed and covered with a protective sheet of silk. To leave it exposed to the night air with its dampness and potential for insect damage would be an unforgivable act of negligence. You gather your personal notes, the loose sheets filled with your rough drafts, your questions, and your lists of possible word choices. These are the scaffolding of your translation, the messy but essential evidence of your intellectual labor. You stack them neatly and tie them with a simple cloth ribbon. Looking at the stack, you feel the familiar mix of exhaustion and satisfaction that comes at the end of a long, productive day. You added perhaps 2 more pages to the Arabic Almagest. It's a slow, incremental progress, but it is progress nonetheless. Like a stonemason adding a few more perfectly shaped stones to a vast cathedral, you are doing your small part in a project far grander than yourself. As you stand up and stretch your aching back, you look around the now shadowy hall. Only a few dedicated scholars remain, their faces illuminated in lonely pools of lamplight, unable to tear themselves away from a particularly difficult problem. You see the elderly Christian scholar, Ishaq, from your translation circle. He is still bent over a text, his lips moving silently, comparing a Syriac phrase with the original Greek. For him, this is not just a job, it is a sacred calling. You see one of the mathematicians, not Al-Khwarizmi, but a younger colleague, staring intently at a geometric diagram as if hoping to unlock its secrets through sheer force of will. The silence of the near-empty library is profound, a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the morning. You give a quiet nod of farewell to a fellow scholar who is also packing up, a silent acknowledgement of your shared endeavor. You walk towards the great doors, your soft slippers making a faint whispering sound on the stone floors. The air is cool on your face as you step out of the library and into the main courtyard. The sky above is now a dark velvet dome, and the first brilliant stars are beginning to appear. The central fountain continues its endless soothing splash, its sound louder now in the evening quiet. The palace complex is calm. Most of the officials and petitioners have long since gone home. The only sounds are the footsteps of the night guards on their patrols and the distant murmur of life from the city beyond the walls. It feels like a university campus after all the students have left for the holidays, a place of immense potential energy, now resting, waiting for the dawn. A quirky but important routine is the nightly security check. The head librarian, accompanied by a guard, will personally walk through the stacks, ensuring all the oil lamps have been extinguished properly. The fear of fire, the ultimate destroyer of libraries, is a constant nagging anxiety. A single tipped-over lamp could undo centuries of work. Historians often focus on the intellectual output of the House of Wisdom, but the daily and nightly rhythms, the simple human routines of opening up and closing down, were the invisible structures that made all of that output possible. The discipline of the schedule, the reverence for the tools, the shared sense of purpose, these were the cultural foundations of this intellectual golden age. It wasn't just a building full of smart people. It was a highly organized, deeply intentional community. You make your way towards the outer gate, the same one you entered through what feels like a lifetime ago. The guards recognize you and pull the heavy gate open just enough for you to pass through. As you step outside, the sounds and smells of Baghdad at night rush in to meet you. It's a completely different city from the one you walked through at dawn. Stepping out of the serene, ordered world of the palace complex and back into the city is a jolt to the senses. The air in the streets is thick with the aromas of the evening, the sharp, savory scent of grilling meat from street vendors, the sweet, cloying perfume of jasmine drifting over a courtyard wall, and the ever-present dusty animal and human smell of a great metropolis. The narrow streets,
so full of bustling commerce in the morning, are now transformed into channels of flickering light and deep shadow, illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns hanging in doorways and the occasional torch carried by a wealthy citizen's entourage. Your journey home is a reverse of the morning's commute, but the landmarks have changed. The weaver's shop with the blue awning is now shuttered and dark. The fountain with the chipped tile is a gathering spot for neighbors, their hushed conversations a low hum in the night. The city's pulse has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. You hear the laughter of children playing a final game in an alley, the rhythmic tapping of a craftsman working late, and the distant, mournful music of a reed flute played by an unseen musician. It's a more intimate, more human soundscape than the day's commercial roar. You are not just a disembodied intellect. You are a resident of this vibrant, living city. The abstract problems of Greek astronomy you grappled with all day now seem a million miles away. Here, the concerns are more immediate: the price of grain, the health of a family member, the latest gossip from the caliph's court. This daily transition from the rarefied air of the House of Wisdom to the earthy reality of the city streets is essential. It keeps the scholars grounded, their work connected, however tenuously, to the lives of the people their knowledge would ultimately serve. As you walk, your mind is a quiet buzz of leftover thoughts from the day. You find yourself replaying the caliph's visit, the brief but intense moment of scrutiny. You reconsider a particularly difficult sentence from Ptolemy, a new possible translation suddenly popping into your head, and you make a mental note to try it out in the morning. Your mind is still working, gently turning over the day's intellectual grist. This is a key part of the scholarly life. The work doesn't truly end when you leave the library. It follows you home, into your dreams, becoming a permanent part of your inner world. You purchase your evening meal from a street vendor, a man ladling a fragrant lentil stew into a simple earthenware bowl. You also buy a piece of warm, fresh flatbread. It's your 9th century takeout. A quirky fringe tidbit of Baghdad street life was the sheer variety and quality of the street food. Cookbooks from the era describe elaborate recipes, not just for the kitchens of the rich, but also for these popular vendors, suggesting a sophisticated urban palate. You finally arrive back at your own quiet alley. You push open the heavy wooden door to your small, dark home. It is cool and silent inside. You light a single small oil lamp, its light pushing back the shadows just enough to see. You sit on your sleeping mat, finishing your stew in the quiet solitude of your room. There are no distractions here, no books to read for pleasure. They are far too valuable to own personally. No entertainments other than the thoughts in your own head. Before preparing for sleep, you look up at the sky through the latticed window. It is a brilliant, star-dusted canopy, undimmed by the artificial lights of a modern world. And for the first time today, you are not looking at it as a scientist or a translator. You are not trying to measure it or map it or understand its mechanics. You are just seeing it. You pick out the familiar constellations, the same patterns of light that Ptolemy and Aristotle and countless shepherds and sailors before them had gazed upon. You feel a sudden, profound connection to the very men whose words you spend your days translating. You are sharing the same sky, asking the same fundamental questions. The House of Wisdom is a beacon, a place of intense, focused light. But that light is meant to illuminate the world outside its walls. The knowledge you are so carefully preserving and creating is not an end in itself.
It is a tool for understanding this world, this life, this universe. It is a legacy passed from the ancients through your hands to a future you cannot possibly imagine. You feel the weight of that legacy, but tonight it does not feel like a burden. It feels like a quiet, profound privilege. Feeling the day's deep exhaustion finally settle into your bones, you extinguish the lamp, plunging the room into a peaceful, welcome darkness. Now, as our time in 9th century Baghdad comes to a gentle close, allow the quiet of this simple room to settle around you. The day's intellectual labors are done. The vibrant chaos of the city has faded into a distant murmur, and the cool night air whispers through the window. Your own body begins to feel the satisfying weight of a day well spent, a pleasant heaviness in your limbs that invites rest. There are no more problems to solve, no more texts to decipher. There is only the soft darkness, the comfort of your simple bed, and the vast, silent canopy of the stars standing guard outside. Let go of the intricate details of the day, the debates, the calculations, the precise choice of words, and allow your mind to drift on the simple sensory memories of the evening. Imagine the scent of jasmine on the night air, the taste of warm bread, the feeling of the cool stone floor beneath your feet. Allow the rhythm of your own breathing to become the only thing you notice, a slow and steady tide pulling you gently away from wakefulness. You have done your part, adding a single perfect stitch to the grand tapestry of human knowledge. Now, it is time for a well-earned and peaceful sleep, a deep rest that restores the mind and prepares it for the quiet wonders of a new dawn.